Oh, and with her is Sam Burdett, who is going to be helping Amy with the chat box. So ask all your questions there. Amy Cage is a business continuity and recovery planner at the city's Calgary's Emergency Management Agency. As she discusses, so she's going to be discussing Ready Calgary's emergency preparedness strategy. Amy's going to review disasters that can occur and what you can do to protect yourselves and your family, home, and community by knowing the risks and how to prepare for a disastrous event, know what to do during a disaster, and understand what to expect afterwards. Amy is going to provide helpful resources and tips to support preparedness. But at this point, I want to introduce Amy and just let her take it away.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks everybody for having me here today. Okay, so before we start, I would just like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to Métis Nation of Alberta. Region 3. We acknowledge that all Indigenous urban Calgarians who have made Calgary their home. So hello everybody, thank you for the introduction, Linda. My name is Amy Cage and I work at the Calgary Emergency Management Agency. And today my colleague Sam Burdett is on the chat because I can't actually see the chat on my screen. So I really do encourage anyone to put questions in throughout the presentation. I'll pause throughout it to take questions as well. But yeah, I'll get started here. So as Linda did say that there's a few people that are not from Calgary. So this is a Calgary specific, well, I'll use Calgary examples, but this is an all hazards presentation and it can apply to anywhere you are. So if you are in a place that may have different hazards or risks, we're happy to take questions as well that can be specific to that. Yeah, so we work at the Calgary Emergency Management Agency, and we're both on the community preparedness team. So what we do, we call it CEMA. We plan and coordinate emergency services and resources during major disaster events. We work with more than 60 agency members that are made up of City Calgary departments, external agencies, nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations, and community partners, both before and during and after disasters. So the whole thing about our agency is that we want to work together to help ensure the well-being of Calgarians, businesses, and communities. And if you're not from Calgary, you likely have an emergency management department or representative in your town or city of some sort. And not to say that we're just specifically Calgary, we do have a lot of resources that we share within the province. And we also have a team, a Canada Task Force 2 team, that's all hazards response that goes all over Canada if something happened, like the Vancouver earthquake or something like that. They're the structural group that goes in, all in to save lives and property and infrastructure. So that's what we do at CEMA. So today I'm going to talk about preparedness. It's very timely. This week is Emergency Preparedness Week. It's a national week that we have in Canada, I think in North America too, where we talk about emergency preparedness. So thanks. I'm glad that this presentation lined up today and I can talk to you about what it means to be prepared. So this presentation today, I'm going to go through the four groups that we like to focus on: knowing the risks, getting prepared, knowing what to do during an emergency, and knowing what to do after an emergency. So the thing here is, like, why are we preparing for an emergency? Why is that important? Emergencies are sudden and unexpected, and if you are prepared, you're able to take care of yourself so others, first responders, can focus on those who are in immediate. So knowing the risks is the first group that we're going to talk about today. So Calgary is Canada's disaster hotspot in both frequency and severity of events. I'm just going to give you some facts. 1 out of 7 disasters in Canada since 2010 has impacted Calgary. 50% of disasters that cost 500 million and over in insured losses have occurred in Canada this century have impacted Calgary. And that number seems to unfortunately continue to grow. So in part of your preparedness strategy, identifying the hazards near you and understanding your risk to them is one of the most important steps to being prepared. So you can better navigate disruptions when they occur to get back to your life and work sooner. So the icons that I have on this slide, they just show a variety of different things that can happen here. They're in no particular order. They're just to show that there's a variety of different risks that can happen, and to consider all of the things is a good thing for being prepared. So we are in severe weather season. It starts in the beginning of May. This week, actually, Emergency Preparedness Week, it's the kickoff. The spring and summer storms. So severe storms, they occur frequently in the spring and summer months in the prairies. I don't know how many of you are from Calgary on this call, but we had thunderstorms the last couple days, and it's just the start of this season. Around 4 o'clock, you always hear the rumbling and the rain coming. So things like thunderstorms, tornadoes, lightning, heavy rain, flash floods, hail, they can all develop quickly and have big impacts into the community. So these pictures that I have on this slide here, on the top left, the supercell that's coming in to the city from the west. So supercells are common in spring and summer. They often bring strong winds, hail, and potential for tornadoes and heavy rains. On the top right corner, we've got a tornado. So this was just outside of the city of Calgary and it touched down. Underneath here, we've got, this is a picture from the 2013 flood that happened. So this is the Stampede grounds. If you're familiar with the area, all this brown is actually floodwater. And this picture here on the bottom right, that's hail damage from the 2020 hailstorm that happened in Northeast Calgary, which was quite devastating. So severe weather in the fall. So one of the biggest issues that we have with severe weather in the fall is when it snows. When it snows, all the vegetation is still in all the trees, all the plants are still blooming, and the weight of that snow causes the tree branches to break or plants to fall down. And then that falls on power lines and damages cars and causes things like widespread power outages or widespread damage into the communities. So these pictures that I have here on this slide, so this is from 2014. I don't know if anybody remembers, but we had, I want to say it was the first week of September, it was September 4th or something. We had 28 centimeters of snowfall in one day. And I remember that was my first month living in Calgary, and I thought, oh, this is a weird place, coming from Vancouver Island where it might snow 3 or 4 times a year, but a nice sunny September week, and then all of a sudden we get a full-blown snowstorm. This was a very significant event because unlike other events that we experienced, this one impacted the entire city from the bottom south end to the top north end. There was 74,000 NMAX customers who lost power during this, and our 311, which is our city information call system, they received 47,000 calls, which was more than they received during the 2013 flood. And just a fact, Calgary, because we love to have severe weather here, snow has been recorded in every single month of the year, including July. So in wintertime, we're no stranger to winter weather. Living in Canada, doesn't matter where you are. Snow, freezing rain, extreme cold, wind chill, and reduced visibility are average days in the winter. These events can also happen quickly and impact people and property. So if you can, it's really important to try to avoid going outside during winter storms. Always be prepared to drive, checking the roads ahead of time. If you're unable to shovel, have someone who can come and clear the road or sidewalk for you. Always wear layers, ensure you have proper winter gear, and make sure that you have a support system. So if you do need something and you're living by yourself and you can't get out, that you have someone that can come and help you if you need it. So those are just the breakdown of months that we like to call it, different seasons. We also like to talk about the secondary and tertiary events that happen during disasters. So they're always compounding or trickling events to any disaster that cause more issues within the community. So the primary effects are the direct result of a disaster, such as a flood or a tornado. These secondary effects like power outages, washed out roads, damages to buildings, large cleanups that can further add complications to a situation. And when we talk about preparedness, we look at it through an all hazards lens because we're very seldom responding to one isolated impact. So here's some pictures of events that have happened here in Calgary in the past. In the top left, we have a bridge collapse that was during the 2013 flood. So a train carrying hazardous material was going over the bridge, and the bridge had collapsed as it was impacted by the flood. So in the top right or left, right here, we've got all the debris and cleanup from people gutting their basements after the flood. So the water had resided, people started cleaning up their basements and their first floors. And then this is all of the materials that had come out of the house. So we had to help coordinate what that cleanup looked like with city resources. Bottom left, we've got a bunch of snow. So this is just something that a snowstorm can happen, but it may impact response times and people getting help. And then we just have a down tree from a storm, which can impact a community or a neighborhood, or if you live in this home and you're unable to get out of it until it's cleaned up. So another thing we like to talk about, we're all familiar with what's happening in northern Alberta right now. So we've got really bad wildfires happening throughout the province. Wildfires are impacting all of us in different ways each year, and it's becoming more of a common occurrence. We're seeing increased wildfire risk, which is leading to increased smoke and air quality issues in Calgary, Alberta, and all over Canada, really. We're seeing a lot more negative impacts from wildfires, and depending on the wind system, we can see effects of something that's happening really far away. So I think it was last year, the year before, there was really bad fires in Washington and Oregon, and we got a lot of that smoke up here because of the way that the wind system was. So regardless of where you live, you have potential to be impacted by wildfires in some way. And that's just the reality of what's happening now. So these pictures that I have here, this is from the 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire. Calgary was actually really impacted by these wildfires. We sent a lot of firefighters. We sent our Canada Task Force group up. We supported the incident at the site, and we also had 2,700 people come down from Fort Mac to stay in university dormitories. Our office here at SEMA, we were really busy because we had actually WestJet flights with either animals or people coming down to Calgary every hour of the day, it seemed like, for a couple of days. So this was a very significant event for us, even though the actual fire was taking place in a different area. So the current northern Alberta fires that are happening right now, we do have a reception center set up in Calgary. So if anyone is evacuating and wanted to come down here, we are able to support them. And we're also working really closely with the province to ensure that we can share resources and support as needed. And we're also making sure that we're staying up to date on this event as it's quite volatile. So air quality, this is just to highlight what happens with wildfires in our city. It seems to be becoming more common. So Calgary, we can experience poor air quality as a result of the wildfires across the province and our neighbors. This is very, very significant because it can impact health and daily routines for a prolonged time. So this picture here to the left This is downtown Calgary, which is hard to see. This is from 2018, where we had an air quality index of 10 plus, and this was considered high risk, and it contributed to a lot of health concerns throughout the city. We had about 202 hours of smoke, which is how Environment Canada measures something like this, which is just over 8 days straight of smoke. And the key things to consider when smoke does come into your area: minimize outdoor activity, try to keep your windows, your doors, your vents closed, and always make sure you're monitoring your health symptoms. Things like increased coughing, throat irritation, headaches, shortness of breath. These are all common symptoms of smoke and how that it can impact your daily life. So just the contrast of a smoky day versus a non-smoky day, it's pretty extreme. So I'll pause here if anybody has any questions about disaster or the risks that I just went over. Oh, I see there's lots of questions in the chat. Sam, is there anything to note?
We just had some issues with folks being able to see the slides.
Okay.
But
Can
yeah, I
everyone
think,
see?
yeah, they can. Everything's been resolved.
Okay, perfect.
So if you are impacted by smoke and are starting to have coughing, like, or you have asthma, because Calgary actually is a very high population of people with asthma.
Yeah.
Obviously you stay inside, but what do you do if you feel like it's getting bad enough you can't stay in your place anymore? Where do you go?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you have another place that you can go, a house that may not have smoke issues inside, or if you can leave town, maybe those are options for you depending on how severe your allergies are. But I think it's also really important that if you are having symptoms and issues, you're staying in contact with medical professionals who are able to help you and advise what the best steps would be for your certain specific circumstance.
So would that be one of the cases? I know people often, if it's a bad heat wave, will go to a mall where there's air conditioning. Is that something that would be applicable here?
Yeah, something like that. Something where you can go get a break, because you know that if you go into the mall, that's not going to be smoky inside, or a place that has really good air ventilation or something like that. Something where you can get a break if your home doesn't have any of that. Good point.
And then to the hospital, I suppose, if you...
Yeah, if it gets really bad, make sure you're getting help.
Right. Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
So the Calgary, you said the statistics were very high for events in Calgary. And is it almost always weather events, or are there other kinds of events that we have?
Yeah, so that insurable part that I spoke to, that's all weather-related events.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
That are causing damage, yeah. And I should mention too, that stat is not including the wildfires and floods that happened in BC last year. However, because they don't have that data yet, but it's still quite high. Calgary has held the title of disaster capital of Canada for some time.
Not a very distinguished title.
Not something you want to brag about, yeah. Okay. Any more questions before I keep going?
Well, we had a question earlier on about AI, and I mean, the concern was a little bit, let's say there was cyber attacks, which are always possible, and a person brought down the electrical grid, and you know, something like that, it's going to be a problem citywide. I know hospitals and a lot of critical infrastructure have backup generators, but what kind of recommendations would you give for people for stuff like that? Or are you going to get to that and I should just wait?
I'm not going to go into super detail about that kind of thing, but I think, yeah, it's more of like that all hazards preparedness. So if that's something that you find you want to be more prepared for, maybe that's just you're taking extra steps that you can be more, like getting a generator yourself, for example, or making sure you have adequate things to cover if you need it. Okay, so the next section I'm going to talk about is getting prepared. So disasters can happen anytime. They can happen if you're at home, you're at school, you're at work. So getting prepared in advance helps you and your family stay safe. So if you're prepared, it also allows first responders to help those who are in immediate danger. So in this section, I'm going to talk about different ways that you can prepare yourself and your home. So we talk about an emergency action plan. So we have actually a plan that you can download on our website, or Linda, if you want to meet, I can send you some hard copies too if this group ever meets in person, and you can hand them out. But an emergency action plan will help protect what matters most. So you, your loved ones, and your pets. And the whole point of this is to get to know how you will respond and how you can prepare in advance. So it includes knowing things like how to leave your home in an emergency, where you're going to meet, how you're going to contact people, and how you're going to recover if there's any kind of disruption to your regular life. So that's things like having contact numbers that are written out instead of in your phone if your phone died and you can't charge it, for example. It's also documenting if you have any specific needs and requirements for any household members. So if someone was in a wheelchair, for example, and you weren't able to bring your wheelchair with you, it's making sure that you know that you can go to the Red Cross, for example, and get another wheelchair, something like that. Important documents and medical information. So if you don't have your electronic copies or something like that, do you have a hard copy, or have you gone and spoke to your pharmacist about having your information on that one site or saved at that location, or your doctor's office? So if you were to lose any medical information, you know where you can go get it. Or your important documents, for example, if you had to leave and you couldn't grab your wallet or your passports, you have that information photocopied and in a safe place that you can grab, saved on like a memory stick or on your Gmail or something like that. Insurance coverage, that's a really big one for preparedness. It's knowing what is and what is not covered. And if you're a tenant, you still need to have insurance. So making sure that you have sufficient coverage for the different kinds of risks that happen here in Calgary. And it's also having sufficient coverage for what your specific needs are. One thing that we do note here is knowing your neighbors. So neighbors are kind of like your first responders if something were to happen right away. It's identifying the people who may need additional assistance in an emergency, additional resources. So knowing who's on your street. So if you're someone who has a disability, for example, does your neighbor know that? And can your neighbor come and check on you if there was a snowstorm and you were stuck or something like that? Always plan for when children are at school or childcare. Always have a designated person who can go do pickup if you are unable to do it. And disasters can be really tough on your pets. So always keep them in mind when preparing for an emergency. It's the best way to ease stress and pressure. And if you're ever leaving, always make sure you take your animals with you. So knowing how to get out of your house. So we always like to use the analogy as you practice fire drills at school or at work, but do you ever practice a fire drill at your house? So that is familiarizing yourself with all escape routes, emergency exits, emergency equipment in your home. If you have mobility concerns, make sure you take appropriate steps in advance to ensure you'll be able to evacuate or have support to be evacuated. When you're thinking about your house plan, also think about if you're stuck inside. So plan for impacts of disasters that could include things like loss of power, communication, isolation, and what that might mean for you and your home. Like things like if the power goes out in the middle of the night and you need to get up, do you have a flashlight handy? Or what will that look like? If you rely on energy for specialized equipment, do you have a generator or a backup power source that can help you? Having a designated meeting place near your home or outside your community. This is a place, if you had to leave your house and there's various exits and you have a family, you all got separated, so you all know where to go just to make sure everybody's accounted for. And if you have someone with a mobility concern, ensuring that meeting place is accessible so that person is also able to attend. So there's many simple steps you can take prior to an emergency to reduce hazards in your home, and a lot of you likely already have this. So things like checking your smoke alarms, your carbon monoxide detectors, fire extinguishers regularly. I always say it's important to do this when the times change because it will remind you this is when you actually have to do something. Know where and how to use utility shutoff valves and each piece of equipment that might be in your house that relates to that. If you live along the river or you live in a flood zone, make sure you're installing a backup valve in your sewage drain to prevent sewer backup. Always store flammable products away from heat sources, and make sure you clean and direct downspouts away from your home to prevent water seeping in. And if you're unable to do any of these checks at home, just find a support person who's able to do them for you and walk through it together on what that looks like. So we do talk about building a kit. A kit includes supplies that you may need in an emergency or disaster that helps you take care of yourself. Gathering emergency supplies doesn't need to cost a fortune, but you'll be surprised how much you already have in your home. Many disaster situations could leave you and your loved ones stuck in your home, so a few extra things organized and in place in advance will help you. This includes things like your emergency action plan, you've got your contact information, you've got some extra clothes, snacks, water. For some people who may have difficulty communicating, consider carrying a personal alarm or a whistle that emits a loud noise to draw attention. Medical alert systems will allow you to call for help if you're immobilized in an emergency. Anything that would make your life a little bit more comfortable and routine in case there was a sudden disruption. I know I grew up on Vancouver Island, so that 72-hour kit was always such an important part of our family planning. So we had all of our stuff in our garage with our camping gear because we knew that if there were an earthquake, we would be on our own for 3 days or probably more. We don't have an earthquake threat here in Calgary like they do on the West Coast. So it's always important to make sure that you have a kit that's appropriate for yourself and your needs. And we also suggest too, it's always good if you're going in a car or for a road trip or anything to make sure that you have a little kit with you because it's very likely you're going to get stuck on the highway in a place like Alberta. It happens quite often. So yeah, things like a list of your medications, including your name, dose frequency, if you haven't had that sorted out before. If you take medications, maybe written information about how to administer your medication. If you have specialized equipment, how to use it in case someone needed to help you, any kind of allergies, or medical contacts in case you needed help yourself, you'll be able to tell someone that it is in your bag and they can help you with that. Yeah, so that's what we talk about when we talk about building a kit or just having some emergency supplies on hand.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the video on. Here we go. So we're looking potentially at dialysis for a family member. And if there was an incident, that person wouldn't be able to actually take the machine with them if they physically wouldn't be able to do it. Is there assistance that, like, would you call 911 and say, I need to clear out, but I need, or how would you get help with that if you didn't have anybody around?
So if that were the case, and you were getting like you were evacuating yourself, I would suggest just going to the hospital or going to a medical place that can support that, and then getting help set up on what that looks like. So I do know that in some circumstances when we've had big evacuations, healthcare has brought dialysis systems into a hotel, for example, so people that need that support, they can just go downstairs in the hotel and get that set up. So that's something that would need to be coordinated with whatever that evacuation looked like or where you were going. But yeah, I would notify medical officials on that to make sure that that person is getting their continued.
Yeah, I would just be worried, you know, going to a hospital that they were going to be overwhelmed anyway, and you know.
Yeah, maybe that's a conversation too for 811 if that were to be done. But yeah, those groups would be able to help you out.
811 is which?
811 is the health link.
Oh, health link, right? Okay.
Yeah. So if it wasn't a hospital, they'd be able to tell you where to go in the community to be able to get that resource.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So other considerations, that's a good segue. So emergency preparedness planning for someone living with a disability with things like vision loss, hearing loss, reduced mobility, or additional medical needs may involve more specific planning. So maybe, yeah, so the key part of planning for different considerations is to self-identify to your support network, your neighbors, your building management, so everyone is prepared to assist you during an emergency. And this would include things like training on any necessary equipment, identifying where to go if you were to leave your home and you couldn't bring your equipment, consulting your doctor or healthcare team on any advice that they can provide to support preparedness planning for these kind of situations, and having a tailored emergency kit or bag ready to go to help manage any emergency. We did a presentation at a seniors complex last summer, and one lady brought her health hospital bag. So it had all of the things she needed in her bag. So when she showed up, she had to go to the hospital, she had it all, and she was ready to let the nurse and the doctor know exactly what she needed. And she said that she does go to the hospital often, and that is always a really big hit amongst the healthcare professionals at the site. So something like that. If you're reliant on power, it's good to contact your local electric company in advance about your power needs for support devices. And they may be able to make your power reconnection a priority. In addition to that, if you have a backup power option, such as extra batteries or a generator, that's always a good idea.
I do believe NMAX also can bring you one.
Yeah, that's true. Actually,
in an instance, right?
Yeah, that actually comes through our office sometimes. They say if we're talking about doing a controlled power outage, for example, they know exactly what house who's had this set up in advance and where they can't do it. So if they had to put that grid off, they know what houses to go bring generators to and make sure that those people still have power for their needs. So that is something that they will do. So getting prepared is also developing different skills and building awareness. So equipping yourself with skills and knowledge that will help you or others during an emergency. And this is specifically important if you live with someone who has who needs additional support. So things like taking a first aid course, having the right personal protective equipment, knowing how to use things like fire extinguishers. So you're able to plan to help others in your family, and you can support as needed if people in your family aren't able to support themselves. So it's also really important. Part of getting building awareness is getting to know who your neighbors are in advance, and getting to know who's on your street. If that's from 3 houses down, you know there's a nurse that lives there. You know her name, you know her phone number. So if you're ever in a situation where you need help, you know that you can call the nurse down the street, or beside you, you know that neighbor has all the different kinds of heavy machinery that could clear your pathway if you were ever stuck, something like that. So you just know who you can get help from or who you can help on your street before anything happens or after it happens. And always remember to work safe if you're doing any kind of cleanup or helping anybody. The last thing you need to do is hurt yourself when you're helping somebody else in a disaster. Okay.
That's
so
right. Sorry to interrupt. No, I was just going to say a good one is learning to how to help someone who has fallen getting up themselves.
Yeah, that's really important.
Because a lot of people hurt themselves trying to help somebody get up from a fall.
Absolutely.
And it's easy enough to do, to hurt yourself, I mean, but there's also easy ways to help people with chairs to get up themselves, and that makes it a lot safer for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're not comfortable helping someone, make sure that you know how to make them comfortable until someone who can help them can come.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Okay, so high-rise apartments. This is always something that we find when we're activated is that somebody on the 23rd floor who moved into the apartment 20 years before without a disability now has a disability, but that building manager doesn't know about it. And the neighbors don't know about it. And then that person calls 911 and firefighters are going in there to move that person down. So if you live in a high rise or a rental unit, it's always really good to talk to that management group to identify and mark accessible exits. You are familiar with the areas designated for emergency shelter or safe rooms. And you know where your muster point is, where it's that meeting place if you were ever evacuated. So learning those evacuation procedures and plans. And if you're unable to go down the stairs because the elevator's closed, you've communicated that to your building manager and your neighbors so they can ensure that you're getting help. And that includes making sure that your name and your contact information is up to date as part of your building's fire safety plan. So there's actually a book that goes in the firebox in every high-rise building. And when there's a fire or an emergency, the fire guys know that they go to that box and they know who lives in the community or in the building. So keeping that up to date is really important. Just to make sure anyone who needs extra assistance is going to be getting it from the fire department.
Can I add a little comment in here?
Yeah.
Just a few years ago, it was pre-pandemic, but not long before, I was working in an office building downtown and I was on the 30th floor. And I don't consider myself as having a lot of problems, but we had a fire in the building, or it might have been I'm having a brain fart here. A fire drill. Anyway, so I started walking down the stairs with everybody else. And by the time I got halfway down, I wasn't sure I was going to make it. My legs were shaking and I felt like I really just needed to sit down. But of course, you're in this big wave of people.
Yeah.
And so by the time I got to the 5th floor, I was darn near in tears because I didn't know what to do. And I was really embarrassed that I had even tried to come down the stairs, not realizing that I couldn't really do it. So if you're, the reason I'm telling this story is if you are a person who, with neuropathy, it makes it harder to go downstairs. If you're on a really high floor, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be that high, depending on how bad your neuropathy is, you might want to have a buddy and give it a try. And if you discover that, oh, you know what, I really can't make it all the way down, then if it's a work situation, then you talk to the fire warden, which is what I did after this, and you make your arrangements so that the next time that happens, you're not forced into the stairwells. Or if you're in an apartment building, I'm sure there's other notifications and precautions that you can take so that people know that you're up there.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Thanks for sharing that. And then that goes back to that piece of identifying who your support network is in advance, so you won't have to be placed in a situation like that, or you have some kind of support where you can
for me, it was really about not even knowing that I needed support.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I was 55 years old and fairly healthy, and
that is a lot of stairs too, if you're not used to doing stairs like that. I think
it definitely is a lot of stairs.
Okay, so the next, so that segues well into when an emergency or disaster happens, you may be asked to shelter in place or evacuate. So I'll talk a little bit about what those two things mean. So in certain circumstances, you may be instructed to shelter in place if the type of emergency means you're safer inside than out. And this means that you should take shelter inside your home, your office, or even your automobile until it is safe to leave. So following steps to help maximize your protection, making sure that you're closing your windows, your doors, you're turning off your faucets, your air intake, you're grabbing your kit, including your radio, your landline, or your cell phone. You've got your TV on, your radio on, you're monitoring websites if you have access to the internet for updates until you're told that it's safe or you're advised to evacuate the area. And if you're in a car, make sure you're turning your vehicle off, you're turning off your fan, you're closing your vents, or you have a blanket in your car that you can cover over yourself if something like hail or tornado was in the area and you knew that there was debris that could break windows or something like that. Evacuating. You could be asked to evacuate for a variety of different reasons. It's most important to understand if you're asked to evacuate, it's because something serious has happened or will happen and there's imminent danger to your life or your property. So if you're asked to evacuate, ensure you're bringing with you your prescription medication, any kind of medical support equipment. You've got your bag, you got your kit, and always make sure you bring your pet, because if you evacuate, it's never clear on when you can come back. And in advance, as part of your preparedness planning, it's always important to plan where you're going to go. So always have a plan to stay with family and friends. And if that doesn't work out, for example, here, the city of Calgary will support Calgarians during a disaster who do not have any kind of community support when they're evacuated from their home. And that's very common in any area you are. So that's also good to check in on what that looks like for your own community if you're not from the city of Calgary. And the city of Calgary will provide evacuees with a safe and welcoming environment to support their needs while they're evacuated. And that's like what we're doing right now for the floods. So people are coming to register here and they're going to a hotel. So I'll just cover some different kinds of responding during an emergency. This doesn't include all of them. I think I have 6 different ones. So if there's a flood, always make sure that you're moving to higher ground right away. Never go near fast-moving water or the edge of any kind of fast-moving water, and never walk or drive through any kind of flood water. Severe weather, always make sure you go inside and stay inside until it's over. And if you are outside, make sure that you're safe from lightning. Try not to stand near any tall trees or flagpoles. Make sure you're under cover in a proper structure if you can. And don't touch metal objects. Structure fire, always sleep with your bedroom door closed. Always make sure that your fire detectors are up to date. You've got batteries in them and they're going to work. You always stay low if you're leaving a fire, but if you cannot get on the ground, have that plan in advance. Can someone help you? What is that going to look like? Maybe talk to a firefighter. and get out as safe as you can, and always call 911 and help will be on the way. Tornadoes. So tornadoes can happen here in Calgary. Especially, we haven't seen one in the city yet. Thankfully, that one, or hopefully that will never happen. But we do see the odd tornado pop up every spring. If this is the case, always seek shelter in a low-lying area, away from windows, doors, outside walls, get into that basement, closet, or the hallway, somewhere where you know that you'll be protected. Blizzards. So if you can, stay indoors, avoid traveling, make sure you've got extra groceries in the winter so you don't have to leave to go to the grocery store or prescriptions. And always dress in warm layers because you never know what the weather is going to be like in a place like Calgary. And a power outage, just make sure you've got a flashlight, use that instead of candles if you can, and always report it to NMAX if there is a power outage in your area. So staying informed during an emergency. The most effective way for emergency services to communicate information about an emergency is through mass communication. So this includes things like radio, television, social media even. And there's also emergency apps that you can download in advance, like the Alberta Emergency Alert app that will take over your mobile device if something is imminent in your area. So I'm going to pause here before I go to the next section. If anyone has any questions on what to do during an emergency. Here.
Look, there's nothing in the chat, but if anybody wants to jump in, feel free.
I'll keep going, and then if anyone comes up with anything later, we can talk about it. So knowing what to expect after an emergency.